Many thanks, Fred, and good morning, everybody. It really is a great pleasure to be here. I always thought in the 80s and 90s when I was living in this town and coming to many of your events that I was engaged with many other people around this town in an extended rolling graduate program on international economic policy. And I don't know whether it's ever been quite articulated that way to you, but you provide an enormous intellectual and public service here at this institute for people at all rungs of the professional ladder on these issues. So it really does bring me great pleasure to be back here. Just a few words of context. As Fred has indicated, I now have the privilege of being the executive director of a relatively new international institute, which has the immodest ambition to become the first major international intergovernmental organization headquartered in Asia by the end of next year. This Global Green Growth Institute is dedicated to, through iterative experimentation by countries and by industry, to transform the very model of economic growth so that, in effect, we hardwire both the economic and environmental performance objectives into a single approach. And we do so in three basic ways. One is to mobilize the best analytical capability that's available for the benefit of developing and emerging countries that want to try to build a rigorous green growth economic development strategy. That is to say, to hardwire both the economic and the environmental aspects of performance into their development strategy, their core development strategy. Secondly, to catalyze selectively some public-private cooperation which could scale investment, innovation, commerce, and the diffusion of best available technology to help accelerate the transformation of more resource-efficient modes of production. And then thirdly, research. We are an institute, and so we are looking to build a portfolio of economic research. I mean, we are fundamentally an economic research institute, not an environmental one, although obviously there is strong confluence between the two and what we're seeking to accomplish. But we are building a portfolio of economic research that looks at the contours and implications of this transformation to green growth over time, and in some applied contexts like this one, to develop some ideas that really could better illuminate the opportunities for a win-win between the economic and the environmental and economic policy. So we were brought into focus in our thinking on this idea because, as Fred had mentioned, there had been some percolation around a set of initiatives that would improve the trade policy climate for trade in environmental goods and services, not only in the existing negotiations, but experts and others were kicking around these ideas for a while. This manifested itself in some work that Gary Huffbauer did in the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council. That group started interacting with another Global Agenda Council. This is a group of experts on sustainable energy that some participants in the room, I'm not actually sure whether any specifically, but I know that Michael Lieberich, whose organization is represented here, was involved in that as well. And the two groups, a group of sustainable energy experts and a group of trade policy experts, spent some time trying to flesh out this concept of a sustainable energy trade agreement. The forum published the first high-level explanation of that, or suggestion for that, in its Global Redesign Initiative report from 2010. And as a result of that, I started getting questions in my former capacity as a managing director at the forum. What next? What should be done next with this idea? It sounds like a good idea, but let's get it done. And in my view, the appropriate next step was basically what Fred just described. This idea needed to be much more closely examined, particularly by trade policy experts, but also by energy and environmental experts, to be vetted and fleshed out so that policymakers could make a more informed decision about whether and in what manner to proceed with the notion and bring it into negotiations. And that's why we have put together this project that spans three institutes headquartered on three different continents. My institute in Asia, Ricardo Melendez-Ortiz's institute, ICTSD, which is headquartered in Geneva, but also has a global focus and is very close to the WTO missions of many countries, particularly developing country missions. And then, of course, your and Gary's institute here, Fred, which is a thought leader in international economic policy more generally. We thought that would be a good team, a good balanced team to put together this kind of a due diligence exercise on this idea. Due diligence in a few different respects. I mean, one is certainly from a trade policy perspective. But secondly, politically, I mean, you can't just look at this as an academic exercise. We're attempting to influence decisions by policymakers, and so you really have to think through, as we will today, what constellation of features are needed to be able to get a critical mass of constituent support behind the idea. And we also want to take a look at what the real-world impact will be in terms of economic flows, but also environmental progress. So we have put together a project that will run over the course of about a year that'll span 3 symposia, this being the first here in Washington, but moving to Geneva for discussion with WTO missions, and also we'll do one in Asia for the interests and constituencies particularly represented in that part of the world. We will commission a range of discussion papers that will ultimately turn into chapters of a volume which the 3 institutes will publish. We expect sometime around now next year. And we announced this last month in Copenhagen at the first Global Green Growth Forum, which the Danish government, Mexican government, and South Korean governments sponsored, which was intended to be an international meeting of high level that had a specific focus on building the institutional architecture for green growth. And in that respect is a fairly unique gathering, which the new Danish Prime Minister has indicated she will hold again next year. But we announced there that we were going to undertake this exercise, and there was quite a bit of interest in it. And I want to signal with appreciation in particular the engagement of Vestas Wind Systems, a leading company in the wind power area, who has come on board as a supporter of this project in partnership with GGGI, and represented here by Peter Brunn, their SVP, and his colleagues. So we are putting together a range of forces, if you will, intellectual and otherwise, to try to really take this idea and run it through a close examination in order, again, I don't think we have any prejudgments about exactly what the specific boundaries of this agreement should be. That's ultimately up to the negotiators and governments, the decision makers themselves. What we're planning to do as 3 institutes, research institutes, is to lay out a broader context of considerations for them. And as a personal note here, I think what I'll be listening for through the course of the day is particular angles of inquiry that we should be engaged in. I want to invite you to be specific and concrete about that. Even who you think might be good to engage as a potential researcher that we could commission work from, and any other strategic guidance that bears upon this question of have we really done our homework here? Because this may appear like an easy win-win, but there are really significant technical and political considerations here that need to be thought well through, and it's our job to do as good a job as we can in order to set the table for potentially uptake of the idea by negotiators, who knows, even as early as late next year. So with that, thank you, Fred, for the opportunity to make a few comments, and I pass it back to you.
Okay. Introductory remarks as well.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Fred. I'm delighted to be here. It's always a great pleasure to work with the Peterson Institute. We've had for a long time, we've had cooperation in many ways, and Gary and many of your, Jeff and many of your good people have been participating in our meetings in Geneva and some other places. And we have been always in a very good communication with the Peterson. But more important than that, we've always looked at the Peterson Institute as a reference in international economics and particularly on trade. And for us, we still think of ourselves as a very young institution that we have been now going on for 15 years. It's always been sort of a role model of the kind of influential think tank on policy issues. So again, we're very glad to be here with you. We're also glad to partner on this initiative with Rick Samans and the Global Green Growth Forum. For many reasons, Rick has gone into what his ambitions are there, and we're very much looking forward to supporting those. On ICTSD, briefly, for those of you that are not familiar with us, we're what some people describe as a think and do institution, think and do tank, based in Geneva, working on promoting sustainable development outcomes from trade policy. So we focus particularly on trade policy frameworks. In the past 15 years, a great deal of our time and energy has gone into the WTO, and well, more recently, obviously, in the past 10 years, into the Doha round of negotiations, and making sure that all topics related to those negotiations are scrutinized in their linkages with sustainable development. We come from a sustainable development perspective. We're informed by a notion of sustainable development that is sort of in line with what has been endorsed by governments back since 1992. But through those years, we have been able to sort of refine it in its proximity to trade policy. More recently, particularly in the past 4 or 5 years, we have put some emphasis on trying to investigate the linkages between climate change policies and trade policies. And that has led us into the energy sector, of course. I said in the past few years, even though when we look at some of our past literature, we find that in 1997, we were already writing some analysis on border carbon adjustments and trade policy. So it's been with us for some time, but in the again, in the most recent past, we have really dig our sort of heels into these issues. So we set up something called the Global Platform on Climate Change, Trade Policy and Sustainable Energies, which is funded by a number of development cooperation agencies in Europe, primarily the Swedish, the Dutch, the British, and the Danish. They have given the support for the kind of work that we have been doing, including on this idea here. The question of the Sustainable Energy Trade Agreement, just to complement Rick's background on that, because it's interesting, it's a sort of a coincidence of minds. We were working very intensely on trying to provide some analysis and some beef to the notion that the WTO and the Doha round of negotiations could contribute to the climate change efforts. And in 2007, we were invited to provide analysis to the ministers that participated in the first ministerial conference on climate change, which took place at the same time as the COP in Bali. So at that time, that COP in Bali identified 4 sectors for inclusion in a post-Kyoto agreement. And this is from research that had been done from IPCC. Those 4 sectors included energy supply. So there were energy supply, transportation, construction and buildings, and manufacturing. On those sectors, we then set to try to understand, again, what were the production patterns and trade flows, and then how trade policies could support that we move those sectors into a low carbon type of economy. And so from that work, we came then to the work that we had been doing for a number of years on environmental goods and services in the WTO, put the two together, came up with a number of lists and analysis on climate-friendly goods and services. I'll talk a little bit about that later. And that coincided then with my participation in the World Economic Forum Global Redesign Initiative. So from the idea that Peter Brun and Michael Levi-Bragg and others at the WEF moved at that time, thinking of the Korea G20 on the sustainable energy free trade area, as they call it then, we added the work that we had been doing. And the result of that is what you have now here. There's this booklet that has been, it's been tabled outside, but I hope that everybody has a copy of that, which summarizes some of the research that has gone into trying to sketch out what could be a case for a sustainable energy trade agreement. We look at this occasion today as a kickoff. As Rick said before, we are very aware that even though there are years of work that had gone into putting this together, there's much more work that needs to be done. We're also well aware of the politics of the political economy behind trying to move any cooperation on issues such as those that we'll be dealing with. And so what we expect is that what we're doing with this initiative would get governments and analysts and others thinking and working on these issues. Something like one of the ideal options that we have in front of us is this plurilateral agreement on sustainable energies. But it's by no means the only possible way of in which international cooperation can organize these issues to move them forward. So we're going on that case, knowing that it may end up there or somewhere else, but that there should be international cooperation on these topics. I think I'll stop here, but I think that's a good background to then get us into the conversation today. And again, what we hope is that we get some contributions from you today, as well as post this dialogue to try to enrich the work that we're doing. So thank you again, and thank you, Fred.
Okay, many thanks to Rick and Ricardo for setting the framework. Before we plunge into the substance, I suggest we go around very quickly. Everyone identify herself or himself, tell us where you're from, and we'll know each other a little better prior to the discussion. Gary, start off.
Gary Hoffbauer with the Peterson Institute.
Ethan Zindler with Bloomberg New Energy Finance.
I'm Ingrid Jigo from ICTSD.
Amy Porges from my own firm.
Amy Christensen from my own firm and Ricardo's board.
Joachim Monkebaan, ICTSD. Shail Khan with GTM Research.
Emmanuel Ivanov-Durand, French Embassy Trade Counselor.
Thibault Carrière, French Embassy also.
Pablo Benitez from the World Bank.
Kathleen Trainer from the Center for Climate Change and National Security.
Martin Vieram with the Peterson Institute.
Sherry Stevenson with the Organization of American States.
Melitza Chosic with UC Santa Barbara.
I'm Dan Esty, normally a professor at Yale, but on leave serving as the state of Connecticut's Department of Energy and Environmental Protection head.
And he's a former senior fellow here.
Former senior fellow and author of IIE book.
He wrote a famous book called Greening the Gap, which if you haven't read, it's still relevant.
Thank you, Fred. Always a great promoter.
Lucas Kodinskas, Canadian Embassy.
Charlotte Olke, FTI Consulting.
David Bailey, ExxonMobil.
Joshua Meltzer, Brookings.
Melanie Nakagawa, Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and Senator Don Kerry.
Antonio Ortiz, Embassy of Mexico.
Ida Hyman Larsen, the Danish Embassy.
Jens Alsbjerg, Vestas Wind Systems.
Rebecca Lefton, Center for American Progress.
Mahesh Sugatan, ICTSD.
Will Cole, Johns Hopkins SICE.
Thomas Dorr, U.S. Grains Council.
Alessandro Pio, Asian Development Bank.
Peter Brunn, Vestas Wind System.